Merry Christmas Eve. I know some of you are panicked. Don't be panicked. Christmas always comes, whether or not you've done all your shopping and whether or not the perfect gift is in the stocking for everyone. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you'll see I've got my ribbons and my Relief Factor studio is decorated, but I'm not in a Merry Christmas mood. Because the first thing I saw this morning was the story, it's everywhere. Joe Biden commutes sentences of 37 death row inmates. Now, there are a grand total of 40 people on death row in the federal system. I'm not talking about states. The president doesn't have the authority to commute or pardon a murderer or a convicted horrible crime perpetrator who's in state prison on a state charge. So there are only 40 people in the entire country on death row, and that's pretty horrific. I'm assuming there are children in the car, so I'm not going to tell you the specifics. The 37 killers, and they're all killers, all men, did horrible, horrible things. And Joe Biden commuted all their death penalties to life in prison. Now, a statement was issued in the name of Joe Biden, that reads in part, "Make no mistake, I condemn these murderers, grieve for the victims of their despicable acts, and ache for all the families who have suffered unimaginable and irreparable loss," Biden said in a statement. Well, I don't believe he wrote that statement. I don't believe he made these decisions. I don't believe he has the capacity to actually go through these files. I think this is an extraordinary display of indifference to the shock that continues to roll out across the country following last Thursday's Wall Street Journal expose. Now, I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about this. You may not have seen the story last Thursday. Annie Linsky, Rebecca Bauhaus, Emily Glazer, and Siobhan Hughes posted a story, "How the White House Functioned with a Diminished Biden in Charge." The subhead, "Aides kept meetings short and controlled access. Top advisors acted as go-betweens, and public interactions became more scripted." I want you to hear the opening of this. During the 2020 presidential primary, Jill Biden campaigned so extensively across Iowa that she held events in more counties than her husband, a fact her press secretary at the time, Michael LaRosa, touted to a local reporter. His superior in the Biden campaign quickly chided him. As the three rode in a minivan through the state's cornfields, Anthony Bernal, the deputy campaign manager and chief of staff to Jill Biden, pressed LaRosa to contact the reporter again and play down any comparison in campaign appearances between Joe Biden, then 77, and his wife, who's 8 years his junior. Her energetic schedule only highlighted her husband's more plodding pace, LaRosa recalled. The message from Biden's team was clear. Quote, "The more you talk her up, the more you make him look bad," LaRosa said. The small correlation foreshadowed how Biden's closest aides and advisors would manage the limitations of the oldest president in U.S. history during his 4 years in office. To adapt the White House around the needs of a diminished leader, they told visitors to keep meetings focused. Interactions with senior Democratic lawmakers and some cabinet members, including powerful secretaries such as Defense's Lloyd Austin, Treasury Janet Yellen, were infrequent and grew less frequent. Some legislative leaders had a hard time getting the president's ear at key moments, including ahead of the U.S. disastrous pullout from Afghanistan. Senior advisors were often put into roles some administration officials and lawmakers thought Biden should occupy, with people such as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Senior Counselor Stephen Ricchetti, National Economic Council head Lael Brainerd, who I've never heard of, and her predecessor frequently in the position of being go-betweens for the president. Press aides who compiled packages of news clips for Biden were told by senior staff to exclude negative stories about the president. The president wasn't talking to his own pollsters. His survey showed him trailing in the 2024 race. Presidents, the Journal notes, always have gatekeepers. But in Biden's case, the walls around him were higher and the controls greater, according to Democratic lawmakers, donors, and aides who worked for Biden and other administrations. There were limits over who Biden spoke with, limits on what they said to him, and limits around the sources of information he consumed. Throughout his presidency, a small group of aides stuck close to Biden to assist him, especially when traveling or speaking in public. Quote, they body him to such a high degree, a person who witnessed it said. Hand-holding is unlike anything other recent presidents have had. The White House operated this way even as the president and his aides pressed forward with his re-election bid, which unraveled spectacularly after his halting performance in a June debate with Donald Trump made his mental acuity an insurmountable issue. Vice President Kamala Harris replaced him on the Democratic ticket and was decisively defeated by Trump. This account of how the White House functioned with an aging leader at the top of its organization chart is based on interviews with nearly 50 people, including those who participated in or had direct knowledge of his operations. Many of those who criticized Biden's insularity and his system nonetheless kept his agenda on track. Do you understand what we're saying here? He's been incompetent and incapacitated for 4 years. 4 years. This began in the spring of 2021 before the decision to leave Afghanistan, originally made for September 11th for some bizarre reason, then backed up to August 31st. 13 Americans died. Thousands of Afghans were left behind. Hundreds were wounded in that bomb blast at Abbey Gate. The president wasn't competent. He's not competent to commute these death sentences this morning. He's not competent. He is, in the law, incompetent people can't make material decisions. They could. It's very clear from this article. Everybody in the White House knew. Who in the media knew? Pretty much everyone who... I called it in February of this year in a Fox News call. He's got to resign. This guy is not competent. And I've been calling him infirm for 2 years, but I had no idea that there was an operation inside the White House in which American legacy media was either explicitly complicit or recklessly indifferent to. The president doesn't have all of his marbles. That's the bottom line. And everybody knows it. And they've known it for years. And nobody told you. The question becomes, are you even at all disturbed that this happened? The greatest cover-up in history. We had Donald Trump's greatest political comeback in history this year, and now we've got the greatest media cover-up in history. Now, I'm going to talk to Vic Mattis about it. I'm going to ask Senator Cotton about it, Bethany Mandel, Jim Garrity. Scott Rasmussen is coming along today. I'm going to talk to a lot of people about this because it's been eating at me all weekend long. It is so scandalous that the American media did not tell us that the president wasn't there. He should have been 25th Amendmented in 2021. He ought not to have run for president in 2020. He ought not to have tried to run for president in 2024. But obviously the First Lady and his senior aides they like power. They want no accountability. There is no accountability here other than Dr. Jill Biden. It's on her. It's on everyone in the inner circle, the chief of staff, the national security advisors. The cabinet members must have known. Everyone around him must have known. Everybody knows when you have, and it takes like 5 seconds to realize that a senior citizen, a really, really old senior citizen, doesn't have it. You can also find the tragic cases of early onset of Alzheimer's out there, and you realize instantly when you're dealing with someone who doesn't have mental capacity. Now, I have no parents left, no in-laws left. They've been dead for many years. But my father-in-law had Alzheimer's, and my mother-in-law had MS and had diminished capacity, and my own mother had a long battle with cancer. Only my dad just sort of fell over dead. That's the way to go, by the way. But some of you don't get to pick. But we know. We know when we're dealing with people who have diminished capacity. And everybody knew. Everybody in the White House, a lot of people in legacy media. I never got to see the president. I never got to talk to him. A lot of people did. Scores and scores of journalists are not journalists. Many, many people in the White House should never work anywhere near a media organization because they just lied to the American people. Jen Psaki was lying through her years as press secretary. Everyone associated with this White House is a liar if they told you the president could do this job. And now we have less than a month to go. and we're going to struggle along with the Politburo, the unnamed informal Politburo around him, for 30 more days before a competent president is back in office. And we just hold our breath. But what are you going to do about it? Really, what? Do you even subscribe to anything you can cancel? You ought never to watch ABC, NBC, CBS, or CNN again. You ought not to be watching MSNBC to begin with. But get rid of the New York Times. Get rid of legacy media. Do not buy it. It did not do its basic job. I want to remind everyone, if you want to go to the inauguration of Donald Trump, there's a chance. We're having a contest at Salem Media that will give its winners 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to an inaugural ball, and we'll pay your expenses back and forth to D.C. Trip for 2 to the Beltway for the inauguration on January 20th. If you want to enter, text the name Trump, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878, 94878. We hope you have a good time. We'll tell you all about that when we have a winner. Angel Tree, I've got one more day because Angel Tree works right up until Christmas morning. And if more money comes in, they can do more presents for children. Give a listen to James Ackerman, the CEO of Prison Fellowship, explain this wonderful, extraordinary drive every year.
Angel Tree is such a special ministry because it doesn't happen without you. The moms and dads all over the country who say, I'm going to think beyond just my own family and I'm going to bless another family, because no child should wake up on Christmas morning and not have a gift to open from their mom and dad. And Angel Tree enables that to happen. And the gift is actually from the mom and dad. They're just not there to deliver it. They're not there to hand it to their child.
You make that possible. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Make a child's Christmas, $30. I explained it online over the weekend. It's $150, you Steelers fans, if you want to help out 5 children. Or you can call 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. I'm a Browns fan, so I have a right to be like Grinch, but we're not Grinching it, even though we're 3-12, we being the Browns. And even though Cade York, whom the Browns drafted in the 4th round a few years ago and then hit a 59-yard field goal at halftime yesterday against the Browns. I'm not bitter. We're in the tankathon. We're down to number 5 because the Raiders won yesterday extraordinarily. That didn't help us. In the tankathon, the Browns are drafting 5, and that's fine because I don't want either Shador or Ward. I want some boring tackles and maybe one of the 2 great wide receivers that are in there. But we'll probably end up drafting 5. Take a tackle, take a guard, nothing sexy. There's not a QB there. Get a second-round QB, get a boring offense, go back to the Kevin Stefanski boring offense, and go back to the playoffs. That's further Hewitt saith not. I do, however, want you to also go over to AmericansForProsperity.org. We have a great set of sponsors here. They're all coming with me to the afternoon. On January 13th, this show moves to the afternoon. On the East Coast, the noon to 3. So I'm going to drive you home from work. I'm going to drive you around lunchtime. All across the country, clear signal. I've been loving morning driving the East for 8 years. I love the fact that you come to me for your news in the morning. But AmericansForProsperity.org is one of the sponsors that have allowed the show to grow and to move into this new time span and be live across the United States with no signal distortion. AM radio is not so great in the morning, early morning or after dark, but it's wonderful midday. It's wonderful from 12 to 3. Going back to L.A., going back to Phoenix, going back to Denver, adding some new affiliates like Hartford, Connecticut's coming on board. Talking to Jim Bly, my affiliates director this weekend. It's terrific. And sponsors like Americans for Prosperity coming with me. And we are going to tell everyone in all 50 states, well, I guess not Alaska in a way, in the lower 48 at the same time every day. We're going to be here to tell you Americans for Prosperity are in every single state. They're in almost every community. You can get involved from your home. You can be involved with like-minded people who want free enterprise to grow and prosper in the United States. All you have to do is go to AmericansForProsperity.org and join. And it's one of those websites you just want to keep on your list of favorites, AmericansForProsperity.org. Please don't forget about them and make it your New Year's resolution to get rid of legacy media. I'm going to talk with Vic Mattis about that after the break of this Wall Street Journal score. And then Visit AmericansForProsperity.org and join them. Joined by Vic Mattis. Vic is the weekend editor of the Washington Free Beacon, co-host of the fantastic Getting Hammered podcast. Vic, you got me through my long run on Saturday, so thank you for that. But I've got a little steam coming out of my ears this morning, Vic. Did you read the news that President Biden commuted the death sentences of 37 of the 40 inmates on death row in federal prison?
Yes, Hugh, I did. Unfortunately, it's a bad way to start this Christmas week.
Right now, I got to ask you, do you think he actually has any idea that happened?
You know, the thought has crossed my mind more than a few times in the last couple of months, Hugh, but in particular, since the New York Times and then more devastatingly in the Wall Street Journal, stories came out about how the staffers are running interference and protecting him and really making a lot of the decisions day to day. And I had wondered this about prior decisions with President Biden and whether or not he's actually actively seeking these policy positions, to really ensure and enshrine his legacy, or are people really on the far left here just giving him things to sign and he signs them because this decision to commute these sentences of these people on death row. The New York Post did a great job of this just shortly after. It's horrific. We heard the rumor. I hoped it wasn't true, but sure enough, it was. And it also doesn't make quite much sense to me.
Well, there are 37 victims' families who are outraged today, and we haven't heard from them yet because it happened this morning early. The paperwork came out. But the New York Post, you're right, they ran through some of the facts, and I'm not going to do that because there are people in have children in the car. I don't want them to hear these terrible stories. These are horrific people, right? And there's actually no reason to distinguish between, he didn't pardon three. Dylan Roof,
Yep.
Mother Emanuel killer, the killer at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the Boston Marathon bomber. I don't like to use people's names to give them any credit. Those are the only three people left. Everybody else got out. Why do we think those three people didn't get commuted, Vic, and everybody else did?
That's the thing, Hugh, because uh, President Biden, according to the statement, had said that, believe me, I think these things, what they did is terrible. It's a heinous crime, but I believe that the system is not just in the way it has served them. Well, if the death penalty is not just from his position as president, then it's not just in all the cases versus some of the cases. And it is very interesting. The ones that you mentioned, they didn't. And I think it's largely, obviously, and I hate to say this cynically as we are in the Christmas week here, but for political reasons, because it would be too politically damaging for his party if they were to say, oh, they let out these, notorious, killers, mass murderers, and what have you, off the hook here. And he doesn't want to do that. And they're hoping perhaps that we don't care about the other people who get let off. I don't want to say let off. Obviously, they have life sentences, but still, I think it is incumbent on members of the media, and kudos to the New York Post, to bring out their stories as painful as they are.
Yeah, this is. I'm really sort of amazed that they would have the chutzpah to do this. It's so obvious. Three very high profile killers are not having their death sentences commuted because it's a political hot potato, and everyone remembers the Tree of Life murders, the Mother Emanuel murders, and the Boston Marathon bombing. Everyone remembers those crimes. Everybody else, ollie ollie, in for you get to live. You don't go to death row. Now, that means those juries, those judges, those prosecutors who thought who did all the work to obtain those verdicts and those sentences got a stick in the eye from the president. But I don't think they did. I don't think he knows what he's doing. And this raises the question, Vic, how many people do you think knew that he is incompetent? I mean, that's a legal art, a term of art I'm using here. He's not mentally fit to make decisions of material consequence.
Certainly, a lot of people who work in the White House know this, and the people who have had daily interactions with him, throughout the administration. Uh, Again, when you think about the story that came out in the Wall Street Journal, uh, two reasons that they come out now. One, he lost, and Kamala Harris lost. And you do wonder, and it's a scary thought. Had she won, would they bother to try to cover the story? And the other thing is, only now I think, what do they have? 50 people who were interviewed who said, yeah, he has a real problem. The president is not well. they're finally coming out now because they think it's safe and that there won't be a political payback for him because he's not going to be in power. So they're not afraid anymore to say these things. We've been calling it out for a very long time. You and I have. And the only thing that people tell us is, of course, well, our opinions don't matter. Even though we're trying to lay out facts about a lot of these decisions and that we don't think he's well, um, their reason is that we're biased because we're conservatives. So that, leave it to us and we'll make the final decision and render that. But I do think it's really bad. Think about the pardons, Hugh. You think about all the sweeping pardons that he issued, and a lot of them, again, the same thought crossed my mind. Does he know uh, the individual circumstances for a lot of these presidential pardons for people, some of whom did not do any time, and some of whom did terrible things, including the judge in Pennsylvania in that particular case?
I don't think he knows. I believe he is as incompetent as anyone you know who sits and quietly smiles at people and nods and says hello. And you and I have both known people like that. My parents, in laws, people who get over 80 slowly slide into their fog. And God love them and take care of them and praise to the caregivers. He's the president of the United States. My question is, Vic, what do we do about a legacy media that knew about this? And I mean, they knew. I called on
Yeah.
him to resign last February. I've been calling him infirm for 3 years. Everybody knew, but they pretended. What do we do about that? I'm pushing the rise of new media, like Getting Hammered, the podcast, and Ruthless, and the editors. But what do we actually do about a media that fails so comprehensively?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but you have this sense of outrage that there needs to be accountability. There's no accountability for them. They're not going to pay a price. George Stephanopoulos just got his contract re-upped, and he's making millions of dollars, and that's after that suit where they had to settle with the Trump. With President Trump and donate a lot of money, more than he donated to the Clinton Foundation. These people will continue going on. The only way that they could pay a price, obviously, is if people stop watching them and if they cancel subscriptions and if advertisers have the wherewithal to realize, you know what, there's a huge chunk of this country that isn't into this. They don't care. They're looking at the 18 to 34 or to 54 demographics and seeing those coveted advertising demographics and thinking, you know what, it's not doing it for us. And you look at the numbers on MSNBC and CNN, for example, and they think, well, we, should put that elsewhere, and perhaps that's how it happens. As you know, Comcast may very well, try to spin off successfully MSNBC. What happens to all those people? Um, so that's one way. But I'm not holding my breath that any of these people. A handful of people I know, former MSM, have come out and said, "Oops, sorry, I apologized, and we should have done better." It's really hard to take that, but in fact, they say that they didn't ask hard questions because the Biden staff made them feel bad about asking about his age. And I just can't help but think if it was President Trump, the Trump staffers would not cow them into silence by saying it's ageism.
Now, Vic, there's one thing that people can do, which is cut their cord to their cable box or drop their subscription in the New York Times or anybody else who participated in the cover-up. The Free Beacon didn't. I didn't. Getting Hammered didn't. We've been talking about this for a long time. Fox News certainly covered it, but they weren't close. They weren't allowed to talk to the president. They had interviews in for 4 years, and Brett Baer never got near the president. So I'm not mad at them. I think you're right. Cancel your subscriptions. Don't watch. But what about the new president and the press room? I believe, actually, they should throw everybody out and start over because those people didn't do their job.
Yeah, I don't. I mean that would be very interesting for them to try to do that, and certainly rearrange the chairs and the questions. And as you know, with the Trump administration, I don't think I'll be surprised if they have, index cards with pre-planned questions for him or for the press secretary, for that matter. You were very kind in mentioning us. We'd love to. We'd love to be there. I'm sure Mary Catherine would love to be there, front and center. She'll ask the tough questions there. I'm just waiting for an opening. I mean, I tell people, we say, don't watch these shows, but in the event they do switch out, Morning Joe with Getting Hammered on MSNBC, please tune into that.
Well, I am in favor of that. I do believe you can't. You got to get people. They got to get their news from somewhere. And I keep telling people, the Call Me Back podcast commentary, the editors, the McCarthy Report, Getting Hammered, of course, Megyn Kelly, and Ruthless, along with my podcast in Dwayne's World. You'll know everything you need to know. We cover the news, and if you listen to even half of that, you'll know what's really going on. But I think it is in the president-elect's power to tell his comms director, to tell the press secretary, take the names off those chairs. We run the White House, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN. They don't get a chair. They mean in the back of the room. And the New York Times, the Washington Post, they don't get a chair. The Journal broke the story. I'm a little bit ambivalent about this because they didn't break the story until December. Maybe they get a chair in the back. But honestly, if you had any access to the president in the last 4 years and you did not report this, you are complicit. Am I being too harsh?
No, I mean, I think, again, like I said, to say that you feel this enormous pressure and cowed by members of the administration, bullied by them, well, then you need to do a better job and you need to do a tougher job. And I know they can because they did it for 4 years against Trump. So, I mean, all we're really asking for is people to ask tough questions to be fair. I don't want a press room filled with, suck ups and other people and who are just trying to kiss up the President Trump or the administration.
But that's what we've got.
And I know that. Yeah, and I know
That's
you agree
what
with
me.
me.
We had a press room full of suck-ups and sycophants.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it would be nice to see if he says that and says, I'm done and let's see what happens. And again, he knows that a good chunk of the American people are done with it too. Might just work.
I really do think for Christmas, I hope the president-elect is thinking about the new press room because there are a lot of good journalists out there at the Free Beacon. You could bring in a lot of people from the left and from the right who have, like Andrew Sullivan, is not going to be a supporter of Donald Trump. Give him a chair. It's not about having obsequious press. It's just they lied for 4 years, and it ends up with commutations like this. Vic Mattis, a very Merry Christmas to you. Do you open presents on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, Vic?
Mostly Christmas morning.
All right, good American. Only
Merry
patriots.
Christmas to
Merry Christmas to you. Patriots open their presents on Christmas morning, not Christmas Eve. That's actually a Russian tradition. I made that up. I'm going to the afternoons on January 13th. I'll be on from noon to 3 out west, 3 to 6. I'll do the rush drive home in the east, and I'll do the lunchtime drive in the west. And I hope this wonderful station that you're listening to carries me. Hope they continue to carry me. And I appreciate if they can't, if they have other reasons that they can't. I understand some of my affiliates have afternoon drive personalities in their markets and they can't move, and I understand that. But I appreciate everyone who's carried me in the morning. We have 450 affiliates, and I hope they all come with me and we continue to spread like kudzu across the land with sweet reason, because I think the second Trump term is going to be chock-a-block full of news every afternoon, and you can't get your news from legacy media. That much we know. Now, I want to give a warning. I'm going to read the New York Post story here, and it has some of the details of the murderers who were convicted for execution, and Joe Biden, allegedly Joe Biden. I don't think it's Joe Biden. I don't think he's mentally competent. I think, I'm just going to be blunt, I wouldn't let him babysit my grandchildren. I wouldn't let him drive anywhere. I wouldn't take him to a mall by himself. I don't think he's competent. So the headline, Biden commutes death sentences of child killers and mass murderers 2 days before Christmas. It's not really Joe Biden. It's Jill Biden. It's the Jeff Zients, the chief of staff. It's whoever else is in his ear. It's remarkable. The story reads this way. President Biden on Monday morning commuted the sentences of 37 of the 40 men on federal death row, a list that includes at least 5 child killers and several mass murderers, in a stunning act of clemency just 2 days before Christmas. Biden, aged 82, gave the reprieve to the nation's most violent murderers, 9 of whom were found too dangerous to live after butchering fellow inmates as part of his effort, quote, ensuring a fair and effective justice system. Make no mistake, I condemn these murderers, the statement said. President Biden doesn't know what in this statement. He doesn't. Among those commuted Thomas Sanders, who in 2010 kidnapped and then shot 12-year-old Lexi Roberts 4 times and cut her throat in Louisiana, days after the girls watched as Sandra murdered her mother on a road trip near the Grand Canyon. Anthony Battle murdered an Atlanta prison guard with a hammer in 1994 after he had already been sentenced to and was serving life for raping and murdering his wife, a U.S. Marine, at Camp Lejeune in New Jersey. Jorge Avila Torres sexually assaulted and stabbed to death 2 girls, Laura Hobbs, 8, and Crystal Tobias, 9, who were riding their bicycles in a South Chicago suburb. 4 years later, he strangled a Navy officer. It goes on and on. The only people he did not commute were the killers at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, First Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, and the Boston Marathon bomber. Now, he didn't make this decision. We know that. Who did? But you know what? The media's having a Christmas party. They're not going to, they put out how the White House functioned with the diminished Biden in charge. Nobody has the power to commute sentences except the president, and the president is out to lunch. He's not there. How do I say this? I don't know that he has Alzheimer's, but he acts like it. I don't know that he has dementia, but he acts like it a lot. And they've known about it since 2021. And they haven't told us. And then the victims of this must be so mad. I have here in front of me, in my other life, I'm a law professor, so I read a lot of law review stuff. I have here a law review article by Steve Twist and Vanessa Kubato, who have not yet published it. It's in draft. I'm reading it as one of their reviewers. The Crime Victims' Right to Justice, the abstract. 36 states have enacted constitutional rights for crime victims. Among them, 12 have vowed to preserve and protect the crime victim's right to justice. The language of these amendments make it clear that a victim's right to justice predates its constitutional recognition. Yet, despite this body of reform, now decades old, courts have yet to interpret the crime victim's right to justice, much less apply it. Until state courts develop this jurisprudence, the victim's right to justice as a matter of state constitutional law will remain an empty promise. This article, this draft article, examines the origins and meanings of justice for crime victims from several vantages. By going back to the original meaning of justice, fundamental principle of fairness where each person receives his or her due under the law, the article argues for the adoption of a victims' rights jurisprudence that ratifies the right to justice for crime victims. And I've been reading this for a couple of weeks and making some notes. Steve Twist is an old friend, and he's written a great case book on victims' rights. But then along comes somebody, and they put a paper in front of Joe Biden, and he signs it. It's elder abuse. It really is. It's fraud. It's an absolute fraud on these families who lost their children and their parents to murderers. It's a fraud that he's a president right now. He ought to resign. They ought to invoke the 25th Amendment. Kamala Harris is not going to win the spelling bee. We all know that. But she's all there, sort of. She'll make good decisions. But at least she knows what people are telling her. I can't not believe it's being reported like Biden did this. Biden did not do this. We don't know who did this. He's not in charge. He doesn't even know what day it is. And you know that, and I know that. He might know that it's Christmas morning. Good days and bad days. How about good minutes and bad hours? That's what we've got with Joe Biden. My phone number is 1-800-520-1234. That has not changed in 25 years I've been doing the show. Not going to change when I move the show to 3 to 6 in the afternoon East Coast time, noon to 3 West Coast time on January 13th. So I'm moving. The Hugh Hewitt Show is moving to afternoon drive in the East, lunch drive on the Pacific, and in between it, adjust by time zone. I hope your affiliate takes me with you to the afternoon. If it doesn't, there's always Highly Concentrated Hugh, the podcast. You can always catch up with me at a different hour of the day if you've got a different host in the afternoon. And stay loyal to your station. We got to keep Radio Free America operating. It's really the last real news outlets are talk radio. They're not too produced, and they tell you the truth. The good ones. And I included myself in that, Mike Gallagher, Charlie Kirk, Dennis Prager. I believe that you get the truth out of Mark Levin every single night. I think Larry Elder gives you the truth. Seb Gorka gives you the truth. Seb going back into the White House. Everyone has a different point of view, but we are honest with you. And I have been telling you for 3 years I was alarmed about Joe Biden. I thought he was infirm. But infirm is a broad term. I never used the term incompetent. I am now using the term incompetent because I see actions that don't make any sense. Pardoning 37 death row federal inmates out of the 40 on federal death row, but not pardoning the 3 politically disastrous ones to pardon. So you can't pardon the Boston Marathon bomber. I don't know when he's due for execution, but he should have been dead long ago. I don't know when Dylan Roof is scheduled for execution, but he should have been dead long ago for the massacre at Mother Emanuel Church. And the killer at the Tree of Life Synagogue should have been dead long ago because that happened long enough ago that they could have exhausted all their appeals. They're the only 3 people left on death row. Allegedly, Joe Biden commuted everybody else's sentence. I don't believe it for a moment. I don't think he's competent. Do you agree with me? 1-800-520-1234. Now, this is just my way of introducing you to the concept. Legacy Media is reporting this straight up, like he did this. He did not do this. Jeff Zients did this, or Joe Biden did this, or I don't know. It's not in Jake Sullivan's wheelhouse. Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan have been running the national security of the United States, which is why it's a disaster. It's why Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Israel have all been attacked by enemies external. We have lost deterrence. The world knows. The intelligence agencies of the world know. Our enemies know. Everybody knows. Joe Biden doesn't have it. He's incompetent. During the break, I went and looked up. I had to deal with this law because my in-laws were in California when my father-in-law developed Alzheimer's. So I had to learn this. What is legal incompetence or incapacity? In California, it's when an individual lacks mental capacity to understand and make informed decisions regarding their personal and financial affairs. It can result from various factors, including cognitive decline, mental illness, physical impairment. When someone is declared legally incompetent, it means they are unable to handle their affairs and make legally binding decisions. In California, the law defines incapacity as the inability to make decisions or perform certain actions due to impaired mental functions. These impaired mental functions can result in various difficulties such as inability to understand or communicate effectively with others, problems recognizing familiar people and objects, failure to reason logically, presence of delusions and or hallucinations, inability to control mood, leading to inappropriate actions considering circumstances, failure to comprehend and appreciate the consequences of their actions. Okay, we just described Joe Biden. And it brings me no joy. I have used the ambiguous term infirmity for a long time. But they're out of control now. You would think that a White House that's been exposed as a giant Ponzi scheme, a White House that's been exposed as lying to us about the president's condition, a press corps that's been exposed as complicit or indifferent to the fact that it's Edith Wilson, 1919 and 1920. It's why we have a 25th Amendment. We are supposed to invoke the cabinet. They're supposed to get together, declare the president incompetent. But they haven't done that. And he is incompetent. And you know it, and I know it. And he just commuted 37 killers' death sentences. What else is he going to do in the next month? He's got 28 days left. He shouldn't do anything. Kamala Harris should be he should have resigned years ago. He is not competent. So what does the new president do? I think he's got to come in and throw out everyone who didn't try. Peter Doocy gets to stay. There are a few other people. They ought to just say, look, we're not going to give front row, second row, third row, fourth row seats in the press room to people who were complicit in assisting their preferred party in covering up. This is the biggest cover-up. It's the biggest media scandal I've ever seen. And it's going on, and we're pretending not to notice. I'm not going to pretend anymore. Forrest in Minneapolis. Good morning, Forrest. What do you think?
I think this is astonishing. And they're all admitting that they, in fact, did conspire to hide the condition of our president. And I used to think of them as merely pardon?
Yeah, you're right. They conspired. They all knew.
I call them now the conspiracy media.
Well, that would be interesting. I'm sticking with legacy media just so people know I'm talking about ABC, CBS,
It's either that
NBC.
or the push press.
Okay,
They're
the push press
They're
too.
trying to push a media position. They're the push press.
There's a narrative out there but the narrative would have worked with Kamala Harris. What I don't understand is if they had done their job, there would have been an open primary on the Democratic side. There's a story this morning about Democrats in disarray. They're going to be in disarray for 2 years, minimum, until
All
they
I
win
can
an
say is
election.
thank God and Merry Christmas.
Okay. Merry Christmas to you, friend. Barry in Orlando, Florida. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning. Greeting. Merry Christmas from the Sunshine State. Joe
I wish I
Biden
was
is
there. It's
running
18 degrees in the Beltway this morning. Going to the studio was a bit of a bracing event this morning.
Well, we're glad you made it.
Yeah, thank you.
Joe Biden is running the country. Joe.
I think so. I think it's
Joe-
President Jill.
Joe is
We
the-
actually do have our first woman president. It's like Edith Wilson was the first. She is the second.
Yes, sir. And I'm afraid I have a 20-year-old son, and I'm afraid Jill is going to get us in a war that his generation is going to have to fight. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think we're going to war in the next 30 days. Although our enemies might try and take advantage of what is now an open secret, but they've known for a long time. The only people who didn't know or wouldn't say are in the White House press corps. They're the only, I mean, I do not know how anyone who works in the White House looks in the mirror and says, I'm going to do my job again. Because it's criminal. What they have done here is criminal. Their job is to report. Their job is to tell the American, and thank you, Barry. Merry Christmas to you. 1-800-520-1234. Their job is to tell us the truth about the president, and they did not do so. Bob in New York. Hello, Bob.
Good morning, Hugh. I think Hunter figured out how to forge his father's signature.
Well, why would, Hunter, I don't know whether or not there's money going on here. It isn't, I don't think anyone on death row has the resources to lobby for a pardon. I really don't know who decided this was a good idea. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. And we'll never know because someone just gets the auto pen. It really is very remarkable. Thank you. The president coming in knows what he's doing, by the way. Donald Trump was at Turning Point in Phoenix on this weekend. Cut number 10, Donald Trump.
Since the election, the stock market has broken one record after another. The biggest gain of stock market after an election in history. That's a good sign. In a single month, small business optimism soared 41 points, which is a record. That's a record. Bitcoin has surged to an all-time record high of $108,000. Congratulations. Congratulations. And just last week, in an overwhelming statement of confidence in our leadership, the CEO of SoftBank, a very highly respected man in Asia, Masayoshi Son, you probably saw it announced that he will be investing, and only because I won the election, he made that clear, only because he has confidence in the United States, between $100 billion and $200 billion. And he's going to be investing. It's equal to about 100,000 jobs at least. And all over the world, people are investing now. They're starting the investments, and it's going to be a beautiful thing with the jobs. But they're calling it the Trump effect because even before taking office, we're already bringing in the jobs and opportunity and safety and common sense back to the USA. We're bringing common sense.
Actually,
back.
having a
That's the
living,
most
breathing,
important.
mentally competent president is a relief. It really is we have no idea who is running this show right now. And if they would just stay quiet about it, that would be better. The weather really is frightful inside the Beltway. 18 degrees this morning. Whew! A little bit chilly. I know some of you up in the Plain States and Alaska say that's nothing. But even in Ohio, we thought that was a little bit cold. I am here to tell you, though, I'm hot. On Friday, there were 40 men, all men, on death row in the federal prison system. 40. 40. Today, there are 3. Because this morning, again, President Biden isn't even awake yet. and they decided to put this story out this morning. Somebody thought it would be a good idea to commute the death sentences of 37 to 40 people on death row. That means the president had to sign a piece of paper doing that. And the victims of those crimes. The only three people left on death row are the Boston Marathon bomber, the killer at Mother Emanuel Church, and the killer at Tree of Life Synagogue. So someone made a political calculation. Well, we can't do that. That would get people mad at Democrats. So we'll just commute every other killer's life sentence. You know, the horrific crime of the weekend was the torching to death of a slumbering drunk apparently drunk passenger on a New York City subway. And you wonder at the end of the long trail, they've got the suspect, they'll figure it out. There will be it should get the death penalty. I'm not a big death penalty fan, but there are some cases where, like the 9/11 guys should have been executed a long time ago. The Boston Marathon bomber should have been executed a long time ago. But Joe Biden, or people acting in his name, the president is not competent. And I want to get back to the main point. What do we do about it? The people in the White House press corps, with the exception of Peter Doocy, have not reported the news for 3.5 years that Joe Biden is not competent. And I'm talking in a legal sense. What do we do about that? Mike in Missouri. Good morning, Mike. Hello, Mike in Missouri. Nope.
Maybe Ned?
Ned. Hey, Ned, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning, you, and Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you.
I don't think there's one person to really blame, Dr. Jill or anyone. I think it's the whole concept of just money. They're selling this country out, and if they can get somebody to pay them to do something, they're signing papers. They're doing anything they can to ride that cash cow to the last day.
Well, but let me tell you, there's no money in these killers that they commuted. I can understand, like, pardons. We saw what Bill Clinton did when he went out the door and he pardoned Boesky. And you always got to wonder, where is the money on some of these pardons? But this is just commuting. They're not leaving jail. They're staying in jail for life. Somebody decided this was a good idea. It's not Joe Biden, because he's not thinking about anything. Do you think I'm wrong? Am I being too harsh?
No, I think you're right on that, most definitely. But I also think that it's just the power and the greed and just the trouble and turmoil that they're trying to cause Trump to right up to the last day to make it harder for him. I think it's jealousy.
Well, wait and see what the pardons look like. Thank you, friend. Joe in Ohio. What do you say, Joe?
Hey, Hugh, I can do this in 30 seconds. So I think your plan about actually rearranging the chairs in the press room is brilliant. I'd take it one step further. After he becomes president, the first press conference, I would have him go out there with note cards and say, well, these are the people they told me I'm supposed to call on. And, go Buckeyes. And I think you probably know Urban Meyer, who Ohio shamed you, was born in the same hospital as Jim Harbaugh, 6 months apart in Ashtabula, Ohio.
Ashtabula is my favorite city in Ohio. It's where my 4 grandparents and parents were born and raised. I am hoping that you will join us in our Angel Tree effort on this, the last day. It's Christmas Eve. So tomorrow, maybe someone will give $30, and I'm sure that Angel Tree can put it to use even with 24 hours notice. But if you give a gift today at the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, Angel Tree will use your $30 and add one more child to the list of the 100,000 plus children they take care of every year. And thousands of you have, and I appreciate your 30, your 60, your 90. Some of you have given $300. I appreciate that as well. The banner is over there. Give a listen to our friend who is the CEO of Angel Tree, because Jim is always there for us. Give a listen.
Angel Tree is such a special ministry because it doesn't happen without you. The moms and dads all over the country who say, I'm going to think beyond just my own family, and I'm going to bless another family, because no child should wake up on Christmas morning and not have a gift to open from their mom and dad. And Angel Tree enables that to happen. And the gift is actually from the mom and dad. They're just not there to deliver it. They're not there to hand it to their child.
James Ackerman has been doing this a long time. Chuck Colson passed away many years ago, and he founded Prison Fellowship. And Angel Tree Ministry is one division of Prison Fellowship. And when you support Prison Fellowship and Angel Tree, you're just taking the work that Chuck began, so many decades ago. And it means so much to these kids to get a Christmas present from mom or dad in jail with a note from them, along with a Bible and a connection to Angel Tree. That's why we sponsor this every year. That's why Prison Fellowship is always welcome on the Hugh Hewitt Show. They'll come with me, I know, to the afternoons. I hope you will as well. Also hope Rhett Rasmussen does. BestHotGrill.com. Go over there. Right now, if you're completely screwed and you haven't done anything for grandpa or dad, you know what you can give them? Give them BestHotGrill.com. And you better get a big box and you print off the Best Hot Grill item that you bought for them and said, this is coming. We weren't going to order it and drag it up here because it's big. It's a surprise, but it's coming. And by the way, you can try it before you buy it at BestHotGrill.com. And if you haven't done anything and right now you're at the office and you're thinking, oh, I forgot to buy a client gift for X. Your best client, your biggest client. Run right over to BestHotGrill.com and say, okay, I'm going to get the hibachi, the small one, or I'm going to get the middle one. They come in all sizes and shapes, from small portable one to huge one. Solar infrared technology. They're the best grill in the world. All you have to do is visit BestHotGrill.com and print off the gift certificate and give it to your friend. Then they'll be happy with you. I am going back to the. Oh, by the way, one more pitch. If you want to go to the inauguration, you've had a dream to do it, and you are not getting a ticket from anyone. They're very hard tickets to get, almost as hard as the Indians-Cubs tickets in 2016, which were impossible. Then go to your phone and text the name Trump, Trump, to 94878, because Salem Media is giving away all expenses paid, trip to the inauguration, 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to the inaugural ball. But you got to enter to win. Trump. Text the name Trump to 94878. Now I want to go back to the phones because I am pretty fuming. The president is not the president, although he holds the office, because he's not competent. And you know it, and I know it, and the Wall Street Journal wrote it up last week. And it's infuriating this morning because overnight they put out a statement. He has commuted the death sentences of 37 of the 40 people. These are horrific people, and maybe they've made their amends to God, but the justice system in the United States condemned them to die, and that doesn't happen very often. You've got to truly be the worst of the worst. And just think about this. There's a list of 40 people on death row. You know how they went about this? Someone said, who can't we commute? It's not Joe Biden. He's not thinking about anything, and you know that, and I know that. Let him do a Christmas interview. Let him do the Super Bowl interview. Let him do anything. He can't talk to anyone. He can't. If you said to him, Mr. President, let's talk about these death sentences. Why did you do it? It would be incoherent. And he wouldn't know the name of anyone. Somebody else did this. And we know that. And you ought to be infuriated, not only with the people around Joe Biden, but the White House press corps that did not ever tell us this. He should not be the president right now. On the Salem News Channel, we're running B-roll of Karine Jean-Pierre. She had been lying through her teeth, but so did Jen Psaki. This goes back to 2021, spring of 2021. Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel, all of it. We don't know who's been running the country. Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, Dr. Biden, Ron Klain, and Jeff Zients. Basically, that's the Politburo. Are you mad about that? Robert in Missouri. Hey, Robert.
Hey, bud.
What do you think?
I think there's a reason why Obama hasn't left D.C.
Well, I don't think that's it, because Obama did not want Kamala to be the nominee. I don't think they have much control beyond the money, and they don't actually run the day-to-day. Dr. Jill Biden decided to do that. This is my view. Jeff Zients is too smart to do this. I don't know why Dr. Jill Biden did it, except to prove that she could. It really is astonishing. I don't think it's Obama. Virginia in Indiana. Hi, Virginia. What do you think?
Hi. I don't think it has anything to do with money. I think what it has to do is somebody that's really an extremist as far as being against the death penalty.
But why would they not commute the other 3?
I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know what the answer is to that. But I was just, when I called, I'm a nurse, and back in 2016, it was obvious then that Joe Biden was, in the early stages or mid stages of dementia. He, when he was out of the cellar, he confronted this heavyset gentleman and said that he called him fat. And then he challenged him to a fist fight. This is while he was rallying.
Dog-faced pony soldier. Yeah, I remember. He's been acting erratically for so long that it was sort of camouflaged to descend into incapacity. But as the Wall Street Journal made clear last week, everybody knew.
Yeah.
It's truly the biggest media scandal of my lifetime, and no one's treating it as such. Thank you, Virginia. Brian in San Diego. Good morning, Brian. You're going to be able to listen to me noon to 3 pretty soon.
I know. It'll be great. Hey, I think that the reason why the Biden administration did this is because in the future, and nobody in the media is talking about what the Democrats did to the Republican allies of Donald Trump. They did imprison them. But when we find out how treasonous they have been to the American people, the penalty for treason is...
Well, there's no treason here. There's just power.
No.
We're not going to prosecute anyone for treason. That takes 2 overt acts. We're not going to do that. I hope Donald Trump doesn't do that. But, Brian, do you think the White House press corps ought to be banned if they didn't raise this question?
I do. There is no question at all. Donald Trump should go to every red state and have people from that state come to the White House and become White House press corps people.
Good idea. I mean, there are lots of fine journalists in America, and he's not, by the way, he's not looking for an easy time. He doesn't care about that. He's not afraid of the press. I just think he ought to go about letting everyone know that whoever is sitting in that chair for NBC, ABC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they all ought to be out. Absolutely out. The LA Times might already be out. AP, they're not reporting the news. No one told you until the Wall Street Journal last week, and who knows how long they've known. Chris in Tucson. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Morning glory, Hugh. To me, the bigger scandal in the scandal is how this is just a patented case of elderly abuse to me, Hugh. I mean, our feelings of Joe Biden aside, they literally just used this guy, and they pretty much just had, it's just been an open cash register for him. And
this has happened over the years. I've known some very tragic situations where an elderly person declines and someone takes advantage of them, and it's happened in my extended family. They vanish. A spouse dies, somebody else shows up, they vanish, and that's just elder abuse. It's kidnapping, basically, but they don't really know what's going on. I don't believe Joe Biden actually knows. If you came up to him today and said, do you know the names of any of the 37 people whose death sentences you commuted today? I don't think he would know. One. Not one. It's astonishing to me. Thank you, Chris. George in Washington State. We're out on the West Coast. Hello, George.
Good morning, Hugh.
Good morning.
Nice program. I think that you might be overboard on a couple of things, including blaming age. I mean, we've got people who are elderly that are very much more competent than Biden is.
Oh, I'm not. Look, my grandfather lived to 101 on his own wheels in his own house. He was completely competent until he fell down. Example. Yeah, I'm not saying everyone over 80. Goodness, no. I'm saying this president, he could be 70, he could be 90. He's incompetent. It's not a matter of your chronological age.
I agree with you, but I'm not going to go down being furious like you are about it. I just want to point out one thing that you haven't mentioned that I think could be added to the mix is that how they went along with, I mean, he was ready to run again to be elected in 2024. I mean,
right.
Nobody stopped him from that when, until the Trump interview came up, and that exposed him, went over a cliff at that point. But
it took another month to get him out, to lever him out. Remember, the debate was in late June, and he quit in late July because they could not lever the machine around him out of power for a month. It's the greatest scandal of my life when it comes to the media. And there have been Janet Cook at the Washington Post just made stuff up. We've had Michael somebody over at the New Republic. We've had a number of media scandals over the years. This is the worst media scandal of my life, that we had an incompetent president. We always talk about the 25th Amendment existing to prevent this, and now it didn't work. Hey, thank you much. Detective Tom, I have not heard from you in a long time. Tom, how are you?
Hi, good morning. Merry Christmas. And
well, Merry Christmas to you. What do you think?
Go Ducks, not Bucks, but Ducks. That's one.
You're too late, buddy. You're going to get run over. You saw them on Saturday night. The Buckeyes are coming for the Ducks.
Anyway, okay. Power of the pardon is absolute, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. He gets it. Did he do it? I have no idea. Are we surprised that he did it? No, of course not.
He didn't do it. That's my point.
Does it matter? Does it really
yes,
matter?
It matters. It just underscores how we can't believe anything in the media. I mean, that's really my point. I'm infuriated at the media.
Hey, Hugh, did you hear about OJ? I've been telling you this for years. Okay. All right, listen.
He's coming your way. Take the W.
Yeah, take the win, Tom. Hey, Merry Christmas to you and all your colleagues on the Oakland Police Department force, because, my goodness, God bless you all. You're working in a difficult place. Bethany Mandel is one of my regular guests. She joins me this morning. Happy Hanukkah, Bethany. I gather you are in high Hanukkah mode with 2 days to go, right?
Yeah, I'm at my in-laws' house, actually. We had our family Hanukkah party yesterday.
Well, good. Then you're in a good mood. I'm actually infuriated. Last night when I went to bed, there were 40 people on death row in the federal prison system for horrific crimes. This morning there are 3. There's only the Boston Marathon bomber and the killers at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. That's because somebody signed Joe Biden's name to a piece of paper commuting the 37 other monsters' death sentences. What do you think about this against the backdrop of the Wall Street Journal expose of Thursday last week that the president is mentally incompetent?
So I remember when you were a conspiracy theorist who was spreading fake news about all of that. So I'm disappointed that you're not spending this entire segment talking about how you were right for 3 years and everyone called you every name in the book for doing that. No, I mean, it's really disturbing in the backdrop of all of that stuff that he's still president. What is happening? Who is running the country? It boggles my mind that no one is asking that question, even in the shadow of all of this reporting.
Bethany, with the exception of Peter Doocy, I would ban everyone from the White House press room who's been in there for the past 4 years, because they are obviously of no use to the country. They didn't tell us the number one thing, which is he's not competent. Why in the world would Trump let them in?
Yeah, no, it's really disturbing, and it's funny because Brian Stelter and all of these like media columnists, decree the trust that we should all have in the media, and we should all respect them and appreciate their hard work and their sacrifice. What can you imagine any other job in America where you can do your job that badly and still keep on failing up? The media is pretty much it.
That's because it's not really failing in the eyes of legacy media. They're not supposed to tell us when Democrats are incompetent. They're supposed to go along with it, because that's the legacy. I mean, ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, those 5 brands are broken beyond broken, in my view, after this expose. Is there any way you can trust anything that any of them say?
No. I mean, Chris Klizza from CNN was hilarious. He posted this like, I should have asked more questions, and people went back into his timeline on X and found, there he is, and found him bullying people like me, like you, who were saying for 2.5 years, there's something seriously wrong with the president. He is not all there, as my mother used to say. He's a few French fries short of a Happy Meal. And now I would like the very simple question answered. Who is running the country? Is there anyone in that press room that's going to ask that question? I don't think so.
Yeah, who did this? They commuted victims. Every one of the people who got commuted yesterday victimized families. They took children from their parents, parents from their children. They're murderers. They're horrible people. Somebody decided, and they lack even the political courage to make it blanket. They knew they couldn't possibly do this for the Boston Marathon bomber or the Tree of Life synagogue killer or the mother of man. But who did it? Do you think we'll ever know?
No, no. So that's not true. If someone has to sell a book who worked in this White House, I think we will know. So when someone has a financial interest in selling their story, I think we might know in a year and a half once that book deal goes through and they start doing a press tour. But can you imagine the message that sends to the 37 families that, like, sorry,
Yes.
your dad, your mom wasn't killed by someone famous enough. You can only actually get the death penalty on federal death row if you were famous enough to do a horror
You've got
crime.
to actually be revolted. I mean, if you think about this, you should not go along because it's Christmas week. That's why they did it. He's not competent. They did a horrific thing. There's no excuse for it. It was never debated. No one ran on it. And nobody did this because the president's not competent. I'm infuriated
And
by
why?
this. Bethany, will Donald Trump do anything to change the White House press room? Do you think he'll actually do anything after that story? Because they hate him all. 95% of elite media hates Donald Trump. Why will he let them in the White House?
Yeah, I mean, they're all going to act like, this is the end of democracy as we know it if he dares do anything. I mean, God bless Donald Trump because the to-do list that he has is a mile long between the FBI and apparently Greenland and the Panama Canal and, settling peace in the Middle East. Good luck to everybody in his White House because, Lord, that is a lot of work in just 4 years.
I would just embrace the idea. And if you did a list, I can name people. I can do everyone on the Commentary Podcast, Ruthless Podcast. I can do Mary Catherine and Vic Mattis. I can tell people about the editors. You can fill a press room with good reporters who will not go easy on Trump. I don't go easy on Trump I don't like this
My
Panama
husband
Canal
wouldn't.
stuff.
No, it's nonsense.
What's that?
No, I mean, it's nonsense. The Panama Canal stuff is nonsense. No, I mean, there are so many Trump critical people who could fill that room. John McCormick from the Dispatch, like you name it. There's a group of folks in there who have sat there enjoying, the last 4 years of getting to say they work in the White House. And that's it.
We need power skeptical people all the time. People who are skeptical of power. That is the press's job. And I don't think anyone in that room except Steve Ducey deserves to be there a day longer. John Gizzi, yes, but nobody else. Hey, Bethany Mandel, thank you. Happy Hanukkah. Follow her on X at Bethany Shondar. Jim Garrity of National Review, the Three Martini Lunch, the Washington Post, and a Jets fan. And normally, Jim, I would begin a Monday program by pointing out that the Browns improved in the tankathon, are now drafting 5, and they could end up drafting 1 overall. But I'm actually angry this morning. I don't want to be angry on Christmas Eve, but I woke up and found out somebody at the White House, wasn't the president, he doesn't have the mental capacity to do this, decided to commute 37 out of 40 death sentences, leaving only 3 prisoners on the federal death row: the Boston Marathon bomber, the killer of First AME Church in Charleston, Mother Emanuel Church, and the Tree of Life Synagogue. So somebody lacked the political courage to even make an ideological clean sweep. Do you think it was Jill Biden, Jeff Zients? Who is running the White House, and who made this choice?
I'd really love to see Merrick Garland talk about this. How does he feel about the work of his prosecutors being overturned? How does he feel about all of the effort being put to get a death penalty conviction on these folks? But you're right. Look, I am reading from the White House, Hugh. President Biden has dedicated his career to reducing violent crime and ensuring a fair and effective justice system. He believes that America must stop the use of the death penalty at the federal level, unless the perpetrator is known to the public, and then they ought to die. That's the principled stand. That as long as people never heard your name, as long as the coverage of your murder didn't get nationwide coverage, you should be spared. But if the public's heard of you, screw you. You're dead. You're toast. Let that sucker fry.
Jim, I mentioned to the audience in the first hour, I've been reviewing a law review article by Steve Twist and Vanessa Kubota, The Crime Victims' Right to Justice. Turns out that there are 36 states that have constitutional provisions protecting the victims of crime. The United States Constitution doesn't, but it's a very fine piece of scholarship about how historically we cared about victims in the United States, and we stopped doing that. Somebody just decided to ignore the victims' families in these 37 cases. There wasn't any notice to anyone that he was going to do this. I mean, I expected pardons for friends and donors, like the Ivan Belsky pardon that Clinton did, or maybe a political pardon or 2 or 3 after Hunter Biden. I didn't expect this. Who decides they need to do this, do you think?
Well, Hugh, let me just jump in and point out. Remember the 1,500 commutations that he did earlier? We were assured that they were nonviolent offenders. Well, one of them was nicknamed the Black Widow, which is usually a sign that you're not a nonviolent offender. Killed 2 husbands and a third boyfriend, but they nailed her on insurance fraud, not on murder convictions. Yet clearly the White House did not do its homework and insisted that was a nonviolent offender. The other thing which I feel like really got glossed over is we talk about nonviolent crimes. Nonviolent crimes does not mean victimless crimes. As I went through all those infamous commutations, the judge who was sending people to juvenile detention centers because he was getting paid off by the juvenile detention centers, those are real serious crimes. Those are, and most of these folks got out because of COVID. They were on home detention or in halfway houses. And the idea, there were a couple of Republicans in Congress who were like, hey, COVID's over. These folks should be going straight back to prison. We only did that as a temporary measure because we didn't want these people dying in prison of COVID in prison. Well, we never got around to that. And of course, Joe Biden then says, okay, you're all free to go out. They now walk the streets completely free as a bird.
Who's really angry, Jim? If you are a corrections officer at a federal facility, there's absolutely nothing deterring people from killing you now. Because if you've got a life sentence inmate in a federal facility, they now have a predicate to believe that they will have their death sentence commuted. And I can't even begin to tell you how I am about this, but it goes back to the Wall Street Journal story last week. And my big question of the day, I want him to banish everyone from the White House. I want Trump to begin by saying no one who was a participant in the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental capacity has a right to a chair in the White House press room. So ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, you're all out. We're going to bring in News Nation, Salem News Channel. We're going to bring in Newsmax. We're going to put journalists in here, and we'll get the Dispatch. We'll get in everyone else who hadn't been here, critics like Jim Garrity. But I don't believe we should let these people go on. Do you?
Hey, Hugh, back in the day, did you have Chris Cillizza on your program?
I did often.
Okay. So way back after Afghanistan, I wrote something, a Morning Jolt column entitled Something is Wrong with the President, pointing to how rarely the president was interacting with the public during the Afghanistan. He wasn't seen for 3 days. When he came out, he'd read a statement off the teleprompter, then leave, not take any questions. He had the terrible interview with Stephanopoulos. I think Cillizza called you out too. I think, but we were trafficking in the worst bottom gutter politics, and that we were discouraging.
We could get the receipts. We could get
Oh,
you
no,
and I Bethany and I. You do? You have all your receipts?
Oh, hell yeah. I'm still pissed over it. I am still mad because you and I were and a whole bunch of other Republicans were pointing out what we could all see, right? The president doesn't hide from the public because it's a good strategy or he just doesn't want to. He does it because he can't. You could see it, I could see it, and a whole bunch of the American people. And by 2023, 70% of the American public, including a bunch of Democrats, were saying Joe Biden should not be president. He's too old to be president. And folks like Chris Cillizza came out and attacked you and I. There's the guy. Thank you for posting the video. And now he has the...
Okay, so we have the biggest media. It's not just Chris, though, and one of the reasons I'm avoiding that...
I got this wrong.
I got hit by so many people.
You do not belong in journalism if you did not notice that Joe Biden was a geriatric who could not speak, who could not answer questions, who could not follow a train of thought. He belongs in a retirement home next to Kay Granger, who's down there in Texas. Could you tell him fired up about this, Hugh?
Well, I am fired up about it because but the consequences are at present not on the table. And the consequences, the only one I can think of, people can cancel their subscriptions, people can stop, is to throw them out of the White House press room.
It turns out he was senile the whole time, and we were attacking people for saying he was. Whoopsie. Oh, well. Keep trusting us, America.
Well, what about my option, Jim? I really do think you walk in and you say, you can stand in the back. We're for the First Amendment. But you don't get the first 4 rows. We're not putting you in the first 4 rows. You don't. Peter Ducey, you tried. You get to stay. Nobody else gets to stay in their chair because they're not journalists. What do you think?
All right. So, Hugh, I'm going to mention a name I bet you haven't heard in a long time. Marlin Fitzwater. Right? There was a time when the White House press secretary was an important job, but it was not an on-camera job. They didn't televise them. Now, information still went out to the press. White House correspondents would report in front of the White House and say what the White House had said. But the televising of the White House press conferences live, which I believe was like an after 9/11 sort of thing, when the you never knew what the president and Ari Fleischer were going to announce, and so there was this need for the whole country to see kind of at the edge of their seat, edges of their seat to know what was going to be announced next. It turned the White House correspondent into a TV star gig, and it turned into something where people wanted to be on there, and they want David Gregory yelling at Scott McGregor, right? This was how you became a bigger and more recognized name.
Sam Donaldson and Nixon. Sam Donaldson and Bennett.
Like that's during a president's press conference, not the the White House press secretary nearly as much. And so I think that if they had decided, we're still going to do these press conferences, we're going to do them often, we're going to do our best to answer your questions, but we're not doing them on camera anymore. I think that would actually be really good for the public, ironically.
Oh, that is a step. But what about? I really do want everyone who was in there, except unless you can make a case for me that they actually did their job, they should not have a chair. Bad idea or a good idea?
I think it's. There's no harm in rattling that saber.
Because
by the way, I
read the Wall Street Journal story. Annie Linsky, Rebecca Bauhaus, Emily Glazer, Siobhan Hughes wrote this story on Thursday, and I've been thinking about it all weekend. It's the greatest media scandal of my lifetime, without question, that we haven't had a competent president for 3+ years. Is there anything close?
Edith Wilson was a year and a half, right? Compare this to look, breaking into the DNC at the Watergate. That's bad. I'm not going to say, let's downplay this. But let's also point out that this was an ongoing one that ironically it didn't succeed. I mean, most Americans looked at Joe Biden and saw the guy who was too old to be president, but we all just kind of accepted it. The Hur report comes out and Biden goes out there and insists that Hur brought it up and how dare he say this, and it's not true. And then we get the transcript and it's, all accurate the way it was, that Biden himself brought up his son's death, couldn't remember what year it was. And Kamala Harris had the nerve to go out there and insist that, this was so unprofessional of her to make that assessment of the president's memory and all that stuff.
I've run the Nixon Library twice. I'm very used to people telling me about Nixon's cover-up. That ain't got nothing on what's been going down and continues to go down in the White House every day, including 37 people who are awful human beings. May they find God and forgiveness, but not from us. They were condemned by the federal justice system. Jim, I recommend to everyone that they change their news acquisition habits and that they go to Commentary and Call Me Back Pod and the editors, 3 Martini Lunch. I run down them all. The McCarthy Report is indispensable. Ruthless Podcast. I couldn't believe a legacy media person I had lunch with last week had never even heard of the Ruthless Podcast, maybe the most influential conservative podcast out there. I just think old media is doomed, but I want to hurry it up. Do you agree with me that old media is doomed?
Hugh, I think you and I would have one glaring disagreement on this. I think the Washington Post is awesome. I think that everyone should read it, particularly the op-ed page. And I think you felt that way up until fairly recently. So I'll understand. We'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
I never discuss past colleagues, whatever my disagreements with them. Yes.
You just held up was really excellent reporting by the Wall Street Journal. Now, I know some people might characterize the Wall Street Journal as certainly they're different from the New York Times. I don't know if you characterize them as right of center or better down the middle. I know some conservatives who say, the Wall Street Journal is liberal. I don't think that fits at all. Certainly not not only not the editorial, which I think the news does a pretty good job of trying to. The presence of a story that you don't like doesn't mean that the publication is liberal or biased or against you. To me, it's much more cumulative. But all in all, because the circulation is declining, cable news viewership is declining, network news viewership is declining. I still would rather these get better. They're not going to die tomorrow. They're not, like who moderated all the debates, Hugh? It was all big network news
There
anchors.
should never be another mainstream media moderating a Republican debate ever.
Yeah, but like with the Trump
'cause-
campaign, even they agreed to them, right? Like this is not a. It was great to see the Trump campaign do lots of podcasts and do lots of non-traditional media and all that kind of stuff. But I would rather have a good mainstream media than like the idea of someday it'll collapse. Okay, but we've been saying
I'd
that for
like
20
cold
years.
fusion, Jim. Can you get me cold fusion first? Because an honest
So which is
media
like-
is going to arrive before that.
We're talking two long shots. One is that the mainstream media gets better and that we can see something that's more. Okay, by the way, I also point out that I think the Washington Post op-ed page, with one notable departure, does a pretty good job of getting a variety of right of center voices.
I really can't comment, Jim. I don't comment about.
Okay. All right, I won't go to that. Let me just pick at that scab and
Look at the
and
New York
further.
Times. Brett Stevens just recanted. All right, Brett's a great writer. He's a frequent guest on the show. He can't save the New York Times. There's just no saving it. It's a puzzle factory right now. That's where their subscriptions come from. Why should they be in the White House press? Why should the New York Times? I know Peter Baker. I know Michael Shear. They're friends. They're on the program. Why should they be in the White House press room? They failed.
I haven't read the New York Times recently enough to give it a good assessment to you. No, and by the way, the small newspapers are dying so much that maybe it would be good to give one from Des Moines Register would be a bad example because they just had the Seltzer poll, but like some newspaper in Nebraska. But what if you gave them a seat in the front row? What kind of questions would they ask? Would it be better? Would it be different? Would it be
Rotating? Anything.
Yeah.
The White House Correspondents Association should be barred. They did not do their job collectively. I mean, can you stay with me for another segment, Jim?
Sure.
All right. I want to vent my outrage because we have 37 people who aren't going to get the death penalty this morning because we don't have a press corps. That's the bottom line. I want to end on an upbeat note on Christmas Eve. Jim, I've got lots of access to Grime. You've got the receipts of Chris Cillizza. I can show you my Fox News column from last year saying Joe Biden should resign. We all can find where we called it out. The media failed. They completely failed. And we have not had a president for 3.5 years, and they're still failing by reporting this commutation story straight. So my simple, and you get the last word, how do we fix the media? It's radio, Jim, you have to talk.
I'm aware of it. No, I'm thinking. If you listen to the editors, that was a Charlie Cook-esque pause.
That was a Charlie Cook pause.
And I will worry that my audio has cut out, that I've lost the connection because Charlie is gathering his thoughts. The alternative is when I'm on with Michael Brendan Doherty. He will then he will begin with some sort of really intense sigh. Let me get close to my microphone.
Yep.
And then it's almost like Darth Vader has just taken a heavy breath, and now you're going to get the long answer. Look, it probably feels like Sisyphus. It probably feels like the media has always been. But we thought things were bad with Dan Rather. You mentioned Sam Donaldson and Peter. We've had these beefs for a long time, and when you see the self-marginalization. I don't know about you, Hugh. You notice BuzzFeed, which at one point was like the big hot up and coming one, didn't they let go their entire news gathering staff?
Yeah,
they won a Pulitzer, right? There's one of people. There are certain news institutions that people think are going to disappear, and I would note that New York Times, USA Today, CNN, a whole bunch of ones that we don't like have been around for a long time, and I suspect they will exist in some form. They may be thinner, they may have new ownership, they may have a different ideological makeup. Everybody jokes about Elon Musk buying MSNBC, but I think they will exist. Now, some of these newer ones, and look, no, I don't mean to poo-poo the hard work of everybody at Puck, Semaphore, a whole bunch of these ones. It just feels like there's at least one or two Washington-focused new website-based companies come along, hiring a whole bunch of really good congressional reporters, and they cover things really well, and then somebody else comes along and decides, I want to go to a completely different direction, and then they disappear. Maybe I'm being harsh. But everybody at
I want to
Axios
go
is
back
be-
to I'm going to go back to Charles C.W. Cook because I had actually missed the Wall Street Journal story until I listened to the editors, and I
really?
stopped and quoted Charles. This seems to have been going on since 2021. Charles was referring to Joe Biden, became president in 2021. This was a conspiracy, a cover-up, a scandal. The duty of everyone involved was to tell the public. Charles was really angry, and I got really angry when I realized what I hadn't read the story. And it was Charles's pause, and then he launched that got my attention. So and then the commutation comes up. I just want everyone to know, everyone in that White House press corps, with the exception of Steve Doocy, knew. They all knew. Couldn't they? Could any of them not have known?
The reason Biden is doing this 2 days before Christmas, right? I mean, everybody is running around doing their last minute traveling, doing the last minute shopping. Everybody's got their invitation to Nakatomi Plaza for tomorrow night. Everybody's like, if you really enjoy doing this, you don't do this the Monday of Christmas week. Like, if the only way Biden could be even more ashamed of this is if he announced it on Christmas, right?
Yes.
Or New Year's Eve or something, right? This is politics 101. If you have an unpopular announcement, do it either right before a holiday, or do it right as some other big news story is breaking, or the tradition of the Friday afternoon news dump, where you put it out on what Saturday traditionally was the lowest circulation day for newspapers. It was the least amount of.
Are you on the editors this week? Are you doing the editors
taping
this
it
week?
Not too long after we finish this interview, Hugh.
I hope you thank Charles for me off air that he alerted me to this. And Jim, I appreciate your joining me. I hope you move with me to the afternoon. Merry Christmas to you, friend. Merry Christmas. Senator Tom Cotton joins me. Senator, it's good to have you, and I appreciate your taking the time in a busy week to join me for 5 minutes. I appreciate it. Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you, Hugh. Merry Christmas to you and all of your listeners. Unfortunately, it's not a Merry Christmas for the families of the victims of 37 depraved, heinous murderers who Joe Biden just granted clemency to this morning in defiance of thousands of jurors' public order, common decency.
Senator, I've been talking about this all morning because I am furious. He is not mentally competent. You know that. I know that. The Wall Street Journal reported it in detail. Who do you think made this decision? Because I don't think it was Joe Biden.
Well, first, let me take the decision first, Hugh, and then Joe Biden's mental competence to make it. The first decision is truly appalling. Hugh, you know, and I know people, oftentimes devout Catholics, who have a principled opposition to the death penalty.
Yes.
That under no matter how depraved a murder, they do not believe in the taking of a life. Though I disagree with those people, I can respect their deeply held convictions. Joe Biden didn't act on such a deeply held conviction today. He only commuted 37 out of 40 death sentences. Who were the three remaining? The Boston Marathon bomber, the Tree of Life bomber, or shooter, and the Charleston shooter. So Joe Biden was willing to commute every death sentence on federal death row except for the most politically inconvenient murderers. So what message does that send to those 37 families and their friends and their fellow police officers who were shot or killed or tortured in cold blood? That your loved one is expendable. Your loved one is not politically inconvenient. So we're going to let his murderer get off, because it's not a principled opposition to the death penalty. It's truly appalling, Hugh. The second question you ask, who's making these decisions? Look, we all have known for a long time that Joe Biden has declined rapidly. I think it's fair to say he is an addled, demented old man. There was a lot of outrage over the last few days about a Republican congresswoman living in an assisted care and memory care facility for the last few months. Hugh, the White House has been a memory care facility for the last 4 years. Joe Biden has been led around by the nose by his crooked, corrupt kids and his left-wing radical staffers and grandchildren, and it's culminated now 2 days before Christmas in letting 37 depraved murderers off.
Senator, I agree. I want to now ask about consequences. You talked to the president-elect. You're the chairman of the Republican conference. It's my genuinely deeply held belief that everyone who's been involved in covering the White House press for the last 4 years, with the exception of Stephen Ducey and people like John Gizzi, et cetera, in the back, that they be banished. They did not do their job. Everyone knew. And if this is the biggest cover-up in American history, it's longer than Edith Wilson's cover-up of Woodrow Wilson's stroke, how can they be allowed to just sit there on January 21st and ask questions? They're just activists.
Yeah, Hugh, I would say it's worse than that. It's not just that they didn't do their job. They were actively complicit in the cover-up. If you recall, Hugh, back in the summer, the Wall Street Journal tried to run a version of the story it ran a few days ago about how badly Joe Biden had declined. And what happened? You had other members of the media manning the ramparts, attacking their fellow reporters, saying that they were outraged that they would even dare raise such questions. That's just carrying water for Democrats like Chuck Schumer, who just a few months before the debate in June said that Joe Biden's mental acuity was great, hadn't lost a step in years, not a step. So the members of the media who have covered Joe Biden for 4 years didn't just fail to do their job, they were complicit. They acted in concert with Joe Biden's high command to make sure that no one else could ask those questions as well. So I've got no time for them. And if Donald Trump wants to evict every single one of them from the White House press room, more power to him.
Well, this is what I hope he does. If there is no consequence for participating in the greatest cover-up, I really am astonished at how detailed that Wall Street Journal story was. I didn't know about it until I listened to the editors by National Review. I had missed the story, and Charles C.W. Cook just launched. He said, this seems to have been going on since 2021. He, Joe Biden, became president in 2021. This was a conspiracy, a cover-up, a scandal. The duty of everyone involved was to tell the public. Charles is right, but I don't think there hasn't been any evidence of a consequence. No White House reporter has been fired by their news organization.
Guys, Hugh, if you read the Wall Street Journal article and you look for all the anecdotes carefully, then you will see that there are instances from the very first days of the Biden administration. In 2021, for instance, one national security aide had to tell another aide that they canceled a meeting with President Biden in the Situation Room. Why? Quote, because he has some good days and he has some bad days, and today was a bad day. So from the very beginning, Hugh, this is not something that just happened in the debate in the summer of 2024. From the very beginning, Joe Biden's family and aides and the Democratic Party have been covering up his decline.
Well, let me move to one more question, Senator, before I let you go, and you got Christmas stuff to do. Tell me there's a plan, because I read this morning that the Republicans have to get their act together on one or two budgets. They've got to get their act together on spending. They got to get their act together on the debt ceiling. Is there a plan? Because there's no reason that on January 21st, the President of the United States shouldn't sign a budget. Well, actually, he doesn't sign the budget. Shouldn't begin to sign reconciliation bills conforming to the budget. Is there a plan?
The plans are being developed, Hugh. I'll put it that way. Obviously, we have a lot of big votes coming up. We have two budgets. We have two major fiscal bills to follow those budgets. We're going to have to clean up the mess that the Democrats are leaving us to fund the government for this year and then do it again next year. So plans are being formed. I'll just say that whether those votes come together, whether they come in sequence, President Trump and the Republican Congress is focused 100% on delivering what we campaigned on: lower prices, higher wages, a secure border, better or lower prices for gas and for electricity, and a stronger military. And I'm confident we're going to get all that done.
That's what I want to close with. Are you confident? I don't care if it's one budget package or two. I've had this conversation with incoming Majority Leader Thune, with Majority Leader Scalise. I don't care if everything gets done. The border, the military rebuild, the deregulation, of course, the tax cuts. Are you confident that will all be done by May?
I don't know if the taxes will be done, Hugh. Taxes are very complicated. They cut across different kinds of industries and regions. That's one reason why we want to pass a bill early that will secure our border and rebuild our military and unleash American energy production. I am confident the tax bill will be done before any of the Trump tax cuts from 27 expire. So I'll put it that way. I'm confident that we're going to get all this done in a timely fashion. Sometimes Congress, as you know, Hugh, doesn't always get the job done in a pretty fashion, but we're going to get the job done.
Well, I pray you are right. Merry Christmas to you, Senator. I'll hope to talk to you next week before New Year's, but you have a wonderful time with your family, and I appreciate the gift you give our audience every week of talking to them in the way that no Democrat does. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Merry Christmas.
And to you. Hey, you know what you can do for Christmas if you have forgotten? You can scholarship someone to the wild adventure, a young gun. Head over to twa.us, send them to Montana for a week if they're between 21 and 35. You can order Jan Genera's books, Making Big Talk Out of Small Talk. Go to jansbooks.com. But I do want to tell you about the best gift you can give, which is gold. Gold, whether you give it as a Krugerrand or an American Eagle or a Canadian Maple Leaf, if you give someone an ounce of gold, you're really helping them save for the future, and you're helping them protect themselves against inflation. And if you do it with AmericanFederal.com, AmFed Coin and Bullion has been doing this for 40 years. My friend Nick Rovich is the best in the business. Call him up at 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. And say, Nick, I listen to Hewitt, and he says, you're the guy I can trust. I want to get on a plan. I want to add gold on a regular basis. How do I do it? What do I have to do? It is a completely transparent, wholly, completely honest group of people in Phoenix, which is their headquarters, but they deal with everyone across the country. 1-800-221-7694. Inflation has never overtaken gold. Gold this morning is at $2,628 an ounce. Over the past 100 years, gold kept more than inflation. It earned more. Now, I suppose that could change, but 100 years is a pretty good record. If you put gold away, it'll still be worth whatever you paid for it, plus inflation, almost certainly in 15 years, in 20 years, in 25 years. So when you buy gold, you're hedging against inflation. Shouldn't be your whole portfolio. I say between 5 and 10% of your wealth in real estate or gold. And if you're going to buy gold, do it from people you can trust. They charge a commission. If you need to sell gold, do it with Nick Rovich. 1-800-221-7694. Do want to remind everyone as well that if you can't get to the inauguration on your own, go over to your cell phone and text the name Trump, Trump, to the number 94878. Trump, the word Trump, to 94878. Because what we do on Salem is we got 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to an inaugural ball, and we're going to send one lucky listener or watcher of the Salem News Channel to the inauguration, but only if you enter by sending the name Trump to 94878. Please also remember 2 more things. Angel Tree, the banner's at the top of HughHewitt.com. We have time. We have time. Scott Rasmussen is back with me. He's in the house. Scott, I haven't talked to you on air in a long time. The founder of the great Rasmussen polls, which you're out of now. Now you're the president of RMG Research. Welcome back.
Great to be with you, Hugh. Always happy to chat with you.
Scott, I want to ask you, as we close this year out, can polling ever be fixed? I want your thoughts on what happened to Ann Seltzer in the Iowa poll. I know she's a respected figure in the world of polling like you are. What happened this time?
Well, with Ann Seltzer, I think she had a methodology that worked for a long time in a state that was pretty homogenous, and the world has changed. When I looked at that poll, the very first thing I noted in their first release was that she said that among college graduates in Iowa, Harris was winning by 30 points. That was ridiculous. Our polling showed that among postgraduates, she was winning by that much. And she didn't seem to filter anything by, a distinction between how many postgrads were in the survey or bachelor's degree. And, you just can't get away with a loose methodology anymore. You really have to focus on who you're getting in your sample, whether it's by where they live, the type of community they live in, what their level of education is. And I think she just had a methodology that was appropriate for 25 years ago and not for 2024.
But Scott, there's no consequence. She retired. No consequences for anyone. It was another huge miss. I don't really know who to believe anymore. How do you,
Well,
if you're a news
actually,
media
let me-
organization, who do you hire?
So, well, you hire me, of course, but no, beyond that, Hugh, what you saw, if you looked at the Real Clear Politics average, on election day, they said the popular vote was going to be a pure toss up. And guess what? Trump won by a little more than 1 point. So that's pretty close. If you went back to election night, there were 43 states that we said weren't swing states. There were no surprises in those. We knew that the 4 southern swing states were stronger for Trump than the 3 northern swing states. And if you looked at the data and you looked at the polling averages ahead of time, I did say that Donald Trump was likely to win unless there was a polling miss. And it turned out pretty much the way we expected it to. Same thing in the Senate. It was going to be, we knew the Republicans were likely to win control. We thought they would pick up Ohio and maybe pick up one more seat, and they ended up doing it in Pennsylvania. So I think part of the challenge is people now want polls to be precise within a single percentage point in every race. That's silly. And Hugh, I got to tell you, the biggest problem that I find with especially conservative critiques of the polls is that they're missing the point. The biggest problem in polling is not whether somebody is 1 or 2 points off or even 3 or 4 points off on an election. The biggest problem in polling is question wording. NPR can do a survey and tell you that most people are opposed to gender affirming care for minors. Well, the reason they can tell you that is because nobody in America really knows what gender affirming care means. If you ask about puberty blockers and gender transition survey, you find 75 or 80% of people want to ban it for minors. So I think we need to focus more on the questions that are being asked and the analysis that's being done rather than the precise numbers that come out.
Scott, we have a long debate because I think the polling miss is, you're actually understating it a little bit because it was so bad after Joe Biden left. But I want to ask you about the media generally. The Wall Street Journal story last week, everybody has known or should have known for 3.5 years Joe Biden is not competent. How do we trust anything in the media when they miss that story? It's the biggest media cover-up of my life.
Well, it is. It's a horrible story. By the way, we now have a congresswoman in the same situation. Why didn't the staff step forward and talk about what's going on? That level of distrust in the media is one of the reasons that the legacy media is really yesterday's news. I think this was the election where they lost control of the narrative, and it is going to be a long and difficult process to restore trust. Hugh, it's not just the media. It's not just the polls. Only 22% of voters trust the federal government to do the right thing most of the time. A majority hasn't placed so much trust in the federal government since the 1970s. We're dealing with all sorts of levels of institutional distrust that needs to be rebuilt. And the only way we're going to get there is if the media begins to behave a little more responsibly, if people begin to open up, and if the government begins to actually follow what the voters want rather than.
So Scott, my exit question, we got 30 seconds.
Sure.
If I'm Donald Trump, I throw everyone out of the White House press room except Peter Doocy, and I tell him, send new people because these people blew it. Should Donald Trump take remedial action on the quality of the White House press corps? Because it was terrible.
Absolutely. The entire institution of the White House press corps needs to be just shredded and start over again.
Amen. We agree on that. And I hope
Good.
I see you in the new
Agree on
year,
something.
Scott. Yeah, Merry Christmas. We can go out together
Merry
on a
Christmas.
note of high agreement. Thank you, friend. Hey, if you have time
Thank
left,
you.
America, don't forget Angel Tree. We have the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. You have time. Angel Tree has time. If you make a contribution today, they can add a child to the list tonight. Angel Tree banner, $30. Make sure one more child gets a present from mom or dad behind bars, and that child deserves a Christmas. Thank you for your generosity.